moderating. Pardon? Oh, okay. Got it. I'm going to be moderating this evening, and I wanted to thank you all for coming. We have three amazing artists who have offered to talk to us tonight about their experiences being an artist in residence. First of all, Gail Williams, who's also worked on this with me, is going to read our land acknowledgement.
Okay.
Okay.
So the Artists Network and the Leslie Grove Gallery acknowledge the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Wendat people. These territories are the enduring home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples from across Turtle Island. We also acknowledge that we are hosted on land covered by Treaty 13, held by the Mississaugas of the Credit. Toronto is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, which bound the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee peoples to peacefully share and protect the lands of the Great Lakes. In the spirit of this covenant, we are grateful to meet, create, and grow together in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect on this ancestral land.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Gail. Maybe we should just start off with just a little bit of housekeeping that basically Barb is going to mute everyone, and at the end we'll have a chance to ask questions. Also, Gail will be monitoring the chat box so that if you have some really burning question, you can put it in the chat box. So I thought we'd just basically start with whoever would like to start of the three of you, and basically tell us where you went. Where did you go? Briefly describe what you did for us. Who wants to start?
Sure, I will go first.
Okay, thank you.
Since I think my residency was closest to home for most of the people listening in this evening. So my residency was on Toronto Island at Artscape Gibraltar Point, and it was with a group called Mudra. And the concept behind the residency, there are open residencies there, and there are many full-time artists who have studios in the space there. It's an old schoolhouse that has been converted into residency space. So there's studio as well as living space and shared kitchen space. And this particular residency happened to be examining our interpretations of work life in general. I mean, obviously specifically to artists of all mediums, but the inclusion of our families and our relationships in the work we do, and how we can re-examine those rules and the prescribed societal take on we leave our loved ones behind when we go to work.
Oh, that's great, Cherie. And why were you particularly drawn to this residency?
I have a young child
Okay.
who's now 4, but he was 2 at the time. And I did this residency twice with him, different ages. I believe they are now taking school-aged children, but at that time, older children were also welcome to join.
Oh, nice.
And I think that they would open up spaces for parents with older children again if there was a call for it. I do have kids who are also university and doing their postgraduate work, and so I think there's room for families to attend together. And there were families who were there large. My partner came and our youngest, but there were other families with 4 children who attended, and yeah, so.
Wow, I'm sure that we have a lot of members who'd be really interested in that. That's great. Jessica, what about your experience? Where did you go?
Funny enough, my first residency was at Artscape Gibraltar Point, but it was a different person who organized it, and it was a different theme. It was called Alchemy, and the whole idea was about examining the sharing of food and art and the intersections between those things. So it was a lot of, they have a garden, or they did, this was before the flooding, so I'm not 100% sure if they still do, but they had an organic vegetable garden in the courtyard sort of space there, and we prepared communal meals together. You go out and, you know, someone would go pick raspberries to make a vinaigrette, and somebody would go pick greens to make the lettuce, and somebody else had eggs, so they would get an omelet going. And I think there were about a dozen of us.
Wow.
So it was a really cool, and people from all over the world. Like there were a couple from New Orleans and somebody from Vietnam. So very different cuisine cultures as well. So that was interesting.
Was that the main reason, you know, were you most interested in the cuisine aspect of it, or in connecting that with your art? Or
it was at the time, and I'm kind of coming back to food now, funny enough. This was, I think it was 2015 or 16 when I did that one. At the time I had imagery of food, like macro images of food that were kind of embedded in my work. It wasn't obvious if you looked at it that there was food there, but it was there. I've always loved kind of the textures, the patterns, the colors of specifically vegetables. They're the best. But but lots of, I don't know, like green onions, when you chop up green onions or any kind of thing. So, and to be around other people who also, there were a few people there who painted food specifically, or the one man from New Orleans he still does these huge murals in the community about community connection, and food is a big part of that down there for them culturally. So it was really interesting to kind of combine. I mean, briefly, all three of mine I've picked them because of the theme. And I think if you pick because of the theme, you end up there with people who have interests in common, and it flows very easily. It's you find your people, right? Like you land together, you're all there for the same reason. And it was a great experience. So
what about the other two? Do you want to tell us now? I mean, we'll come back to all this, but what were the other two experiences that you had?
The other one was, the second one was Pico Island, which is one of the Portuguese islands in the middle of the ocean, the Azores, literally the middle of the ocean. It's the middle of nowhere. And it was a water themed residency, which made sense. And at that time I was there doing work about jellyfish and doing image transfers specifically. That one also had a lot of international, and it was very multidisciplinary. There were the one gentleman there he was from Austria, and he was a performance artist, and his whole thing was he wanted to create a performance to do with yodeling and water, like stuff that you would just never in my normal, you know, artists that I meet and have interactions with, these things don't come up. So it was interesting to watch people with very, very different practices kind of go about their business and see how they pull their work together. That was cool.
And I imagine Portugal would just be so beautiful.
It is. The islands are very, very different from mainland. They're volcanic islands. So it's like being, like if dinosaurs had come out of the bush, you wouldn't have been surprised. It's that kind of a setting. It was very surreal. And just ocean everywhere, and the volcanic rock and everything. I would highly recommend it. It was a beautiful place.
Wow. And what about the last one you went, the third one?
The third one was an arts research residency, and that was in Paris. This was just before the pandemic, and it was not at all focused on creating art. It was just about being there and being sponges, soaking in the fact that you're in Paris. And the woman who ran the residency, I don't know how she does it. She's got the energy of like a 23-year-old. She had us on this, we were walking like 10 hours a day kind of schedule. It was crazy. And she was very well connected. So she knew all these curators and all these guides, and she got us into places you never could have gone to if you were just there as a tourist. So, you know, you go to the big museums if you want, but she also had us do tours of historic artist studios. Like it was there was a sculptor, and I can't remember her name now because that's that's what being in your 40s is like. For those of you who aren't there yet. But her grandson showed us around her studio and told us all about, I mean, she's passed away a long time ago, but told us about her history and her
Wow.
work and all the, yeah, and you couldn't just walk in there normally. It was a special privilege to be there and to meet him. So things like that. It was cool.
That's totally amazing. So your 3 experiences were so incredibly different. So I'm sure we're going to come back to some of those. What about you, Vicki? What was your experience?
Well, hi, everyone. It's exciting to be here because to share, I had the most incredible life-changing experience. I recommend everyone to do this. I went to, it's called Chateau Orcovaux. It's 3 hours outside of Paris and in the rolling hills of the French Champagne countryside, in a little teeny town that may have maybe 80 people, no stores, no restaurants. The chateau is perched up on a hill. It's a very historical building, and the owner now, Ziggy, one night we'd have a history night and he told us the whole story. It's a very period building where the furniture was like in World War II. The Nazis took over the chateau and stole everything except for the tapestries. It was an incredible experience. So in part of parcel, my husband and I went, we had a week in Paris. He drove me to the chateau because he wanted to see it. So it's 3 hours of a drive. And you arrive and you're kind of like, wow, like, you know, what am I doing here? What's going to happen? And it was incredible. So you get your own private bedroom, you get your own private studio, which is the view from my studio would blow you away. Incredible salon where you would have meetings and you'd have your champagne, you'd meet everybody in an incredible dining room, and you have a chef that makes you really immerse yourself in the French culture. But you arrive and they give you a tour, they show you your room, your incredible studio, and then you kind of, it's not, for me as a Canadian landscape artist, it was, I think, more incredible because I really focused in on the French landscape, which I'd never had an opportunity to paint or explore before. But you meet, we had 15, so there are 2-week sessions that you apply for. And there was 15 artists. We all arrived in the same night. You all come into this beautiful living room. Like the ceilings are like 20 feet high. It's just spectacular. You have your champagne, welcoming, and then you meet each other. And then you become a family because you're living, breathing, eating under the same roof with these 15 people that you've never met before. And they're not just visual artists. Some of them are writers. You create incredible friendships. We went hiking. We all seemed to be kind of like-minded people during our 2-week session, which I don't know how that happened, but we would meet in the morning after our French press coffee and go for an 1.5-hour hike in the rolling hills. It was incredible. Then I'd come back to my studio. And when you get to your studio, it's an incredible room with the most beautiful windows with period piece furniture, and that's your space. You would staple your canvas. I brought rolled canvas, large pieces. You just staple it on the wall and you just go to it. There's like, the time is your own. You have all day to create. You meet for lunch. You have a beautiful dinner. They had different evenings of like a literature night. At the end of the 2 weeks, you'd have a studio tour where everyone would come into your studio and you would talk about what you created. And I think it's an opportunity to just go someplace with no interruptions, meet incredible people, immerse yourself in the culture. And I created 6 paintings that I just absolutely love, and had the opportunity to meet just amazing lifelong friends that I all over. It's an international residency, so people come from all over. And when I left, I cried as I went down the road, and I had to leave. You know, there's no negativity to any moment I had at this place.
Wow.
Leaving was hard, and now I've remained through Instagram is amazing. You can remain great friends with some of these people and follow their life stories and their art. And I think it just helped. It reminded me of my years at Queen's University when your time was your own. You know, you could be in the studio all night long. They gave you a studio that was above your room. So if you're making noise, you're only going to, wake yourself up. And
Right.
You're running down the hall and you're having champagne in the middle of the night and you're outside. And one guy was a videographer and they had this room in the basement, like full of champagne. And then there was another room full of period costumes. So we dressed up at night and we did crazy videos. I felt like I was a kid at university, just immersed in this incredible experience. And if you do it, I would highly recommend you go alone. Like go alone, be your own self, find your people, and just have the best time of your life. And I can't say enough about it. And it was sort of like a year ago. I went the last 2 weeks of October 2020.
Just before COVID.
No, just after. So
Oh, after.
I was accepted before COVID and then they closed.
Oh,
So my residency was delayed and they contacted me and said I could come last October. So a year ago now. So things were getting better. And when they said you can come the last 2 weeks in October, I said, I'm going. I got on that plane and it was the best artistically, emotionally,
wow.
just culturally, the food, croissants, the coffee, the food every night by a chef who would present the food to you and you'd laugh and you'd stay. It was just a different kind of experience. If you're looking for, I think you create your own experience here. You have to go with an open mind and have the best time of your life. And your experience will be based on you as an individual. And I was scared when I got there. When my husband drove away, I said, what the hell am I doing here? And cried when I left. So
Oh, isn't that great? Oh, my goodness. So there's so much to talk about here with the three of you.
Can I just ask,
Oh,
one
I
person
skipped
has asked, how do you spell that name? I think it starts with an O, doesn't it? Or
Orquevo is ORQUEVAU. Chateau Orquevo. Yeah, that's
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Fabulous. These all sound amazing. Maybe it would make sense to go back to Cherie, because the next question that I wanted to ask, because I'm sure people are interested in this, what was the submission process? Was it difficult? How did you apply? Can you share with us how that all worked for you?
Sure. It was very simple. It was an online submission, and I was asked to submit some photos of my work, although they do take musicians and videographers and artists of all disciplines. So it looks different depending on the type of art that you're producing, and then to write a short essay about myself and my reasons for wanting to participate in the residency. And I will say that I spoke to the two organizers of this particular residency, and they said really the most weight was placed in the more personal answers, because they're looking to cultivate a group of like-minded individuals, like-minded in the way that we're all interested in community and supporting one another, and we're there to explore and be open-minded, and so that is the type of applicant that they're looking to have join their group.
And how did you hear about it? How does one find out about
Yeah, well, there is a website online called Akimbo, which is spelled AKIMBO.
right?
And you can go on there and type in anything you're looking for. If you're looking for exhibitions, if you're looking for calls for art, if you're looking for artist residencies, it's a great resource.
Perfect.
I personally found out about it from, I was working at a co-working space with my son at the time. And so I found out about it on their billboard, and I had seen it because the year that I did it was the first year that it was open. And so I would say, your local cafes, check out the billboard, because often artist groups will post things there, and it's just an unsuspecting place that you might find some information.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's great. We have another question there in chat, Gail.
No, it's okay. I'll just type it in.
You'll come back in. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, Jessica, you had 3 times you had to submit. How did you find out about these residencies, and how did it go? What was the submission process?
That's a good question. The submission process, I think it's always daunting to kind of, for anything, for shows, for grants, for residencies, it's all the same. You have to kind of put aside your fear of rejection and just put out what you've got. Here's your images, here's your artist statement, or your personal essay is a great idea. Cherie, I think yours very specifically, but I'm sure all residencies, they want to curate a group of people who are going to get along and bond and cry when they're leaving, like Vicki's experience, right? I'm sure that's what they all want. So mine, I think I used to subscribe to a whole bunch of different email lists that posted opportunities. One of them was Instant Coffee, which has a Toronto listing that you can sign up for. One was Akimbo was a good one as well. Res Artist also lists international artist residencies, and I am not sure if they have an email newsletter, but you can go on their website and you can look through either by what country you're interested in, or if there's a specific like some residencies can allow families, some of them just can't accommodate that. So if you want to bring your kids, your partner, you could look filtered based on that. And I think those are the places I tended to look. So I'm pretty sure that the ones that I applied for, I would have found within those resources.
And how many artists were in the 3 trips that, is it usually around a dozen artists, or?
It does seem to usually hover around that. I think a group that's any larger, you have trouble bonding with, and it would just it would end up splitting into mini groups within the group. I think a dozen people you can sit around a big dinner table, and you still will find like that one person that you love to talk to when you go for the hike in the French countryside. Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
There was the one when I was in Portugal, I had roommates. There were 4 of us in one sort of tiny apartment space. So you kind of bond more with those people. And there was a day where we rented a car and we just drove through the countryside, and that was a new experience for me, because I'm used to having to be a drag whoever I'm with, because I want to stop and take pictures, and they just want to go for a walk like a normal person. But when you're in a car with 4 artists, chances are if one of you has seen something you want to stop for, you're all happy to stop. And we ended up, you're roaming around the ditches for 2 hours just in your own little world, and nobody's impatient about it. So that was also that was a cool experience.
Oh, fabulous. Oh, that sounds great. And Vicki, how did you apply to your wonderful experience in Paris?
Well, it's funny because a good artist friend, maybe you know her, Julie Hopkins, she's an abstract artist.
Yes, I do know her.
And we're very good friends, and she had told me, I think she went a year or 2 years before I went, and she raved about it. And I think kind of timing, I wasn't looking to go to an artist residency or anything like that, but when she told me about it, I think timing for me was just perfect. I thought, wow, wouldn't that be amazing to have that opportunity to go and create art in an environment like that. So I applied, and the application, I think like any serious art application, he's looking, Ziggy, when I was there, it's interesting, you get to know the people behind the scenes, the administrative people, and what they're looking for, like when I was there. But like any application, you want to send really good, high quality photos. You had to write about yourself, about everything about you, what you do, why you do it, and why you want to go there. And so maybe I didn't think about them choosing people that would fit together, but if they did, we were incredibly well fit when I got there. And I was surprised when I was accepted. Like, I was blown away, and I just thought, I said to my, it's timing. You know, I wanted it. I applied. I worked hard in the application, put a lot of heart and soul and time into writing what I did. And it's interesting when I got there, because Ziggy, the owner, his father owned the chateau for years, and it had always been like an artist space historically, and he restored this building for artists. If you saw it, all the bedrooms and all the studios, it was meant to be this. And he was fascinated, you can laugh, by Instagram. So he loved watching what you did on Instagram and what your art was like, what your art really was like, what you were like. Because when he first came to my studio, that first day when I was setting up my studio, he looked at my art, he says, so this is what it's like in real life. Because he was fascinated. He's the most incredible man, so interested in a lot of in depth about his life and his how he got to where he was there. But he was very interested in you as an artist and your work. So I think he took a lot of time looking at art and the applications, and they tell me there's thousands of applications daily. So I don't know.
That's what I was just going to ask you, is how competitive, and I'll ask the other ladies.
I don't know how competitive.
Oh, you don't know how competitive it was, or how many people applied?
I don't know how many people.
You don't know.
I keep thinking maybe I was lucky because it was COVID. And, you know, like, I'm not understating myself, but I thought, wow, if there's 2,000 applicants a week.
Wow.
Maybe it's the personality that shone through or something, but I was very grateful to have an opportunity like that.
Oh yeah, well, it sounds absolutely amazing. So I'm going to go back to Cherie again, because I know that people are thinking, how much does this cost? Or does it? Or does it? Is it free? So can we go back to you? So how did the financial end of it work out?
Sure. The cost for a week at Artscape to do this particular residency, I'm not sure about other residencies there, was $1,100 the first time around. The second time that I did it, there was a grant that was allotted to families who participated. So I believe that we received $200 or $300 in grant money for attending the residency. It's been 2 years, so but it was somewhere in that amount. And I should say that we did have to bring our own food, and we did prepare the kitchen garden is still there even after the flooding, and so we were able to use food from the kitchen garden. So you're bringing your own meals. This was just accommodation, but it included a private room. I had a private room. The second time I went, because it was COVID, I had a private studio and a private bathroom. There are some rooms where it's just your room and a shared bathroom with one other room. And then the kitchen is shared with everybody who's attending during that time, which includes the artists in residence who are full-time at Gibraltar Artscape. So yeah.
Okay, and you brought your own food and cooked your own food. So you didn't eat with all the other people?
Well, what we did, our group did breakfast and lunch on our own, although generally families, if they were making pancakes, they would make extra and we would share it. We did do communal dinners though, and so one family would take a turn for each night. So we had 5 families the first time that I did it, and so everybody took a turn preparing the dinner meal, and then we would all gather together. And of course, our group was larger because it included partners, spouses, children, maybe 3 children, maybe 4 children. So it was a big group. We filled the halls and we filled the cafeteria space for sure. And then some of the artists in residence would come in and they would join us, and we would just say, well, just join us. You don't have to make dinner, just there's lots of food. So just sit down and break some bread with us and eat what we've prepared. So yeah.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So $1,100. Okay. And that included your room. And for a week, did you say?
It was a week. Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay, excellent. Jessica, what about your experiences? So there were 3 of them. What?
And they ranged. I also had a bring your own food experience at Gibraltar Point, and I believe that one was 10 days, and I think it was 1,500. I could be wrong about that. In my mind, it usually ends up costing between 100 and 150 a day. And mine have been 2 of mine were 10-day residencies, and the last one I did was 2 weeks. The one I did in Portugal, we had it was sort of like a hotel of mini apartments. So we had, it was it was what really should have been a 1-bedroom apartment, but then they put 2 cots out in the living area because you're not there to watch TV, so we weren't using that area anyway. And then you had a little kitchenette, so between the 4 of you, you sort of could either share in the making of meals, or you could go out. There were a couple of restaurants and just sort of little cafe places locally that were walking distance, so you could do that if you chose. Or you could, meet up with somebody else and make dinner together or something. And then the one I did in Paris, at the time, I almost threw up in my mouth about once you do the exchange. You're paying in euros. It was so much. I think it was 2,200 euros, but that included meals. I think it was almost all the meals. You got a meal card, and that was also sort of almost like dormitory setting. Everybody had their own private room and private bathroom, but it was a cafeteria style kitchen. And so you had a little card that you just went and you could get your breakfast, lunch, dinner. And if you didn't spend it all on wine, you had enough on the card to last you for the 2 weeks.
So 2,200 euros, Jessica, what is that in Canadian dollars, and how long was it for as well?
Roughly, it's usually times it by 1.5 or something. It was, I don't know. In my mind, it was somewhere around 3,500. Because then you're paying for like a museum. I think she had us a museum pass that was good for 2 days, and you could have whatever museums on that list you wanted to go to within those 2 days you could go to. And I believe we also had a certain number of metro tickets included with that, because we were going all over the place. You needed to have that. So
and it was for how long? How long was it?
That one was 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, 2 weeks. All right.
So, and then, I mean, the same with Vicki, you need your flight, you need your
flight. Yeah.
You're going to stay in Paris on either end of that to adjust to the time difference or whatever, then that's all up to you.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, I assume you had to rent a car, Vicki, to get out to the middle of, the French countryside, like those sorts of incidentals would all be on you, just depending. And then it's like, if you go to the one at Gibraltar Point, if you're in Toronto, it's a ferry ride away. It's not far, it's not complicated. If you forget something at home, you can probably go home and get it, or it's a bit less daunting, I guess. I loved doing it. It felt like a very good, it felt safe, honestly, because I was scared at the beginning. It was way out of my comfort zone, and it felt like, okay, well, I can try this and it won't be too scary.
The Toronto one.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a good way to start.
I thought so. And it was, even just in terms of language, I mean, it turned out English was the main language at all 3 of the ones that I did, but you don't know that for sure.
Right.
As soon as you leave and go out in the world, other people are going to speak other languages, obviously, and I don't speak any of them fluently. So,
right.
So even just as far as that, it made it a bit easier for me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's wonderful. And what about you, Vicki? What was Ziggy's? How much did it cost to go to Ziggy's Chateau?
Okay, so I wrote it down so I get it right. So this is all in American dollars. So for 2 weeks, I think most people go for 2 weeks. I think there's an opportunity to go for a month if there's space, but I don't think many people go for a month. But I could be wrong on that if you wanted to go for a month. It was 3,400 American dollars, but they offered you a grant of $700. So my cost was 2,700 American dollars, which include all my food,
Wow.
accommodation, beautiful studio, and it's an expensive trip because you can't go to Paris and not spend some time there. So you have to add that on. I brought my daughters out for 10 days afterwards. So I made it, I was in France a month. So it was an incredible experience, but you can take a train to a town that's about 40 minutes from Orcovo, and they pick you up from this little town. So you don't have to have a car. Many people didn't have a car. So you could take the train and then they pick you up, and then my husband drove me there because we were there together. And they took me to the train station when I was leaving. So expensive. There's nothing to buy when you're there. There's not like you go out for restaurants or anything. You're immersed in this incredible place. And the only other thing that was a cost is shipping my art back. If anyone decides they want to go there, I would speak to them about what you make sure you can take home, because shipping back from Orcovo was a struggle. And I didn't get my paintings for about a month that they were rolled up in a tube, and my paints and stuff like that. That's something I hadn't really thought about before. And they do tell you that in your application, but I thought, I'm going to take all this canvas and I'm going to take all my paints and heavy jars, and it was expensive to ship it home. No problem getting it there, but shipping it home. But otherwise, that would be the cost. Worth every penny.
Yeah. Oh, well, I actually am surprised to hear you say $2,700 for 2 weeks, including your food and everything. Yeah, it's amazing.
American. That's American money. So
yeah. And in terms of supplies, and this is a question, I guess, for all three of you, did you all bring your own supplies?
I did. Like when you get there, you have a beautiful empty studio, and they do have this one studio room that, as an artist, like I left things there for the next group. Like if you didn't want to drag it home, I found things that I needed. There was canvas, but everyone's working in different mediums, so everyone brought their own, and stretchers. Most people brought rolled canvas. They had stretchers there, so I stretched my canvas, then I unstretched it and rolled it when I came home. So they had a lot of things, but everyone brought everything you needed, because where would you get it?
They weren't providing any art supplies at all. No. And what about you, Jessica, and both the other two? Yeah, Jessica and Cherie.
I only had one. I'm a photographer most of the time, so you just bring your camera and hope that they let it through security.
Right.
But the time when I went to Pico Island, I deliberately wanted to do image transfers, which was something I had no experience with, and I needed to think, because again, there was nothing. I think there was a dollar store somewhere on the island, and that was about it. And she had warned us ahead of time, there's nowhere for art supplies. So think of what you need. And then you also have to think of your weight restrictions. And like that, for us, we also extended the trip. So it was a 3-week trip, and only 10 days of that were the residency. So I needed to think in terms of what else, like we brought wetsuits and stuff. It's the Atlantic, it's freezing, and there's jellyfish everywhere. So a wetsuit weighs a lot, and flippers, and the snorkel and all that kind of stuff. So I had to really, it's the smallest. Normally when I buy art supplies, you're going to use it, so you buy the big ones, right?
Yeah.
And I was buying like these tiny bottles of gloss medium and stuff like that, and really being selective about what paintbrushes am I going to use while I'm there, what rollers do I need, or that kind of thing. It was a good exercise for me, because at that time I was used to being in the studio and having everything I wanted was there all the time. And if you're somewhere like Toronto, there's a million, it's not a million art supply stores, but compared to the country, there's a million art supply stores in Toronto.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to really think ahead. So it was good for that. It was, yeah. And then I had to, once I got there and I made some things that I couldn't bring home, and I had to learn to be okay about that, to just leave them with, there was a guy who had a family property that he was turning into sort of just a big art installation, and artists could leave their work there. And I had transfers that I had done onto clay roof tile that had sort of crumbled and fallen off these roofs, that was just sort of on my route to the studio every day. And there was just no way I could safely stick them in my luggage and bring them home. And I thought, you know what, really, they probably belong there in the islands anyway. So it's the first time I've ever made work and just walked away from it. So that was also an interesting.
We have an interesting question here, Lorraine, that we probably hadn't thought of.
Oh, good. Okay.
That the three of our guests here might be, I'm sure they have good info on this. Were there teaching or workshop expectations, or like, were you required to do a show there or teach something there as part of being allowed to participate in the residency?
That's a very good question. Anybody want to grab that one?
That's an excellent question, because everyone asked me before I went, so what are you going to learn there? You know, what are they teaching you? And there was no teaching moment from them. You were there immersed in the glory and creating what you wanted to experience in your 2 weeks there. Some people I continued doing my landscape. Some people came with fresh new ideas of something completely different than what they do at home. So opportunity to just do something. But the coolest thing was the collaboration with other artists. Like, you're working really late, 2 a.m, sipping your tea, and Tom would come over and he'd say, you know, how's that? And that was phenomenal. It took me back to my fine art years at Queen's. Like, just everyone working in each other's studios. And then at the very end, the second last night, they did have a studio tour where there was champagne served, and we all walked from studio to studio, and I had a chance to share, and they had a chance to tell me what they thought. And it's an incredible experience, but there was no teaching, and there was no expectations on they didn't expect, there was no expectations. It was all open-ended.
Right, but was there an expectation of you to teach something, or make a show, or leave a painting in a gallery or something like that?
Oh, okay. So there's a little gallery in the town of Orcovo called Diderot so they choose one of your pieces.
Okay, so there is.
To start that, but you don't have to say yes to it. They said, we love that piece. We would like to have it for a future show. But just like at Queen's, they took art down there. But you didn't have to say yes to that. It was up to you if you'd like to leave it.
Thank you.
So I guess it's very much like when you take an art class in Halliburton, you know, you learn from each other.
Yeah.
I'm sure you got feedback from each other, and just the atmosphere of having so many artists together that you learned from each other. Yeah. What about you, Cherie? Was there any teaching or?
So we did have sessions where we gathered and we were discussing various books that were also available in the Mothra library for us to use as resource or read while we were on the island. We were asked to share some of our, like, I teach yoga. So if there was somebody who taught yoga who wanted to do a yoga class once a morning and there was interest, so we kind of threw our collective interests and abilities into the hat and offered them up for the week, which was phenomenal. We had campfire evenings. And so the musicians would bring out their guitars and ukuleles, and all of the kids, whoever was still awake, would join us. And then we did an open studio day at the end. We had a studio visit from Simon Pope, who is a British artist who teaches currently, and so he came by, and we had kind of a very impromptu, informal discussion about what we were working on and forward steps that we could take, both process as well as where we were looking to go broader scope with our work moving forward. And then this spring, there was the very first big exhibition of Mathra work that was at another artscape location, and featured the work of several artists over the past 3 years that they've been running the residency. But all of those things were optional. So if you didn't have a skill you wanted to share, or you didn't feel compelled to share it, that was fine. You were there. It was self-guided learning, and also self-guided sponging up of information as well as the surrounding. And I should say that if you haven't experienced the residency on Toronto Island, as much as I know it's fabulous, I travel as well for art and I love it. But Toronto Island as an artist residency feels like you are in another world, and it does feel very, I want to use the word healing. It's just a slower pace. And I think being on an island and being surrounded by water and beach and the water sounds, and there's no shopping there. So you do have to bring in all of your groceries and all of your art supplies for sure. You can obviously ferry back, but if you're only there for a week, I recommend bringing everything over with you. But as far as residency experiences go, it is a magical experience. The one word of caution I would say is that the building itself is more, because it's an older school building, it has a very rustic cottage feel. So be prepared for that. But as far as an overall experience, I felt like I was a million miles from Toronto, and it's just stunning.
Oh, that's nice. That's great.
Beautiful.
What about you, Jessica? Were you expected to teach, or?
No, I'm trying to think if it was all three of them. For sure, the last two that I did, there was an introductory, all of us around a circle in a room where we all stood up and said, this is me, this is what my normal art practice is, this is why I'm here, that sort of a thing. And then at the end, there was an open studio, or, if people were going to do performances or whatever, where you could share what you had, even if it was just what you were kind of toying with in your mind, and you had little rough sketches or thoughts that you wanted to discuss at the end of the period. It was kind of the space to do that. And the one that we did, actually, no, both Pico Island and Paris, they were open to the public as well. So there were other people just from around who were interested in knowing what these I'm sure in some cases it's this weird novelty watching artists at work, it just out in kind of in the wild doing, a lot of people maybe don't see that kind of thing, so they would come by to see at the end of the thing. And again, there was no obligation, but for instance, there's the open studio that they did in Paris. I didn't create anything that was, because I'm a photographer and my process takes time. I didn't have anything ready to show from what I had done while I was there. But what I did have was an installation that I had done actually at the Artist Network Gallery. on a big scale, and I figured out how to make that small and take it with me and kind of make it work in the space that was allowed there. So then it gives you an opportunity to share your work with a completely different audience that's not people from your hometown or people who do the same art shows you do during the year or whatever, totally different people. So that experience was great. I think like everything in life, I think you get out of it what you put in. You could go
Yes.
and not participate at all. And I think the ones that are either lower cost or no cost have way higher expectation of what you are giving back to the community because you're not giving money. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's always an exchange of something. So I think there are definitely residencies out there that you don't pay to attend, but then there is an expectation of you're leaving a piece behind, or you're teaching workshops while you're there, or something in exchange for the gift of the space and the time that they're giving you.
And we asked Vicki this question, but Jessica, did you feel that the 3 experiences that you had, was it really competitive? Was it difficult to get in? Or do you not know?
I don't know is the honest truth. I think the Paris one was probably the most competitive of them. I also, I don't know if it's false modesty or over modesty or whatever, but I assume it couldn't have been too competitive because I got in. I don't know if that's, hopefully that's not true, but
I'm sure.
it's, you never know until you try, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
a huge part of it is finding the right fit. Like, I mean, if I applied for a residency that just wasn't, you know, the right fit, they would probably see that from a mile away. And it wouldn't necessarily be that I wasn't a good artist. It's just that I wouldn't fit in with whatever they're creating there as a residency. So I think the ones that don't cost anything, or the ones, especially the ones where they pay the artist, I think those are incredibly competitive to get into. I don't, off the top of my head, know. I know Fogo Island is a very competitive one because they don't have a lot of spaces. It's, I think there's only or something, and you know, so things like that. But it depends on what you want. If you want to impress somebody with a very competitive residency on your CV, then that's your choice. That mine was more that I wanted to live. I wanted to I wanted to have an experience. I wanted to soak it in and enjoy it and feel like I belonged there, and meet people that were interesting. And so I think if that's your goal, then you should be able to find residencies that you will, they'll see that as well, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And Cherie, was yours, do you know anything about how competitive your experience, how difficult it was to get into that residency?
Yeah, they did have quite a few applicants that they turned down. I didn't ask the numbers. I just asked because we were a small group. So, and I know that they keep it fairly, they have kept it fairly tight. My understanding is, and she did say, well, think about how many artists apply to a juried exhibition. And we're getting just as many applicants for the residencies.
Right.
I think that with each residency application you write, you learn something about yourself in the process, which is a gift in and of itself. And it translates both in your day-to-day life as well as your work in the studio. And so apply, and don't be afraid to apply, and don't be afraid of how far it is, or how close by it is, and don't be afraid of how many people are applying, because you just never know. You might be the person that they're looking for.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna ask a tough. Oh, sorry. Yes, Gail.
Just one more question is, because both Vicki went to a place in France, which we have the name of, but I don't think we have the name of Jessica's place in Paris where she went, and also the correct spelling of the place that you went to in the Azores.
Okay, so it was, what I would do is tell you the organizations that did both. So the one in Paris was L'Air Arts, which is L''AIR and then Arts.
Okay.
And the AIR is a nod to Artist in Residency, and there was some other reason why she named it that as well, and now I can't remember. And I know that the location partner that she had at the time has changed, but I also know if anybody can figure out how to run anything, it's this woman. And and I'm saying this because it's intimidating to send a lot of money overseas to a complete stranger for something that you don't know what you're getting into. And coming away from it, I just thought, you know what, she can make it happen. She can, whatever needs to happen, she will do it. She's so driven, and she was very, anyway, yes, I would highly recommend anything she does. And the other one in Pico Island, it was actually a woman from Toronto, a Toronto artist who organized it, but she had Portuguese heritage. So that's why she was connected to the island. And her name was Teresa. The organization that did the residency was called Arts Unfold. And if you're on Instagram, that's, I think, just all one word, Arts plural Unfold.
Okay.
And she had her own practice. She did anyway, before the pandemic, 3 residencies a year. She did, one was about the body. So some of that was movement-based artists, some of it was visual arts. One was about the body, one was about water, and I cannot remember what the other one was about. But she had 3 sort of specific lines of interest herself, and so she organized residencies around that.
That's great. And by the way, thank you so much again we're not finished yet, but to the 3 of you for recommending these places, because that makes a huge difference to people if they're thinking, as you said, of applying somewhere and they don't know the people, don't know the organization. It makes a really big difference to hear from other artists that you had a fabulous experience. Mm-hmm. So my other question, or we have a few more questions, but and this is a hard one, I think. If you think back to your experiences, what was the most positive aspect of the artist in residence experience? Anybody want to go for that one?
Sure. Community for sure. So developing the friendships that we've all spoken about during the time we were there. And the other really positive thing is that you're in a different space and you're looking at things differently. So you're slowing down and you're with different people, you're in a different atmosphere. And so it just changes your perspective, which is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fabulous. What about you, Jessica or Vicki? What was the most positive thing that you took away from your experiences, you think?
I think just like for me, I think it's actually hard for me to put how I felt in words. Like to experience something like I did, the community of this place, these people, the culture, and it was incredibly quiet because you didn't go anywhere. You know, just entrenched in this opportunity to be creative, no expectation. You could just be yourself. And I highly recommend, if you do an artist residency, to go alone. You get there, you might be a little afraid, you know, insecure about the whole thing, but everybody was in the same boat, and you would meet and have conversations and hear their life stories and their struggles, and you'd laugh and you'd eat great food and you'd have this creativity all night in your studio and early morning and hikes and walks. And I can't tell you what I walked away with, just the most awe moment and friendships that because you're living, breathing in the same space for, you know, you're bumping into each other, going to the washroom and shower with your towel around you, running in and out, because the beautiful bathrooms, but they were shared. It was, you know, running up and down the studio, making popcorn at night, bringing it to your friend, you know, in another studio. Like it was just, it was magical. It was the most magical thing artistically, I think I have experienced in my lifetime. So
that's great. And I think I missed somebody. Jessica, what was your most positive thing you took away? not wanting to answer that one? Or?
No, it's, I mean, both these other women have taken the words out of my mouth. The bonding that happens, and I think the personal growth and the life experience of all of it, and the things, I don't, the connections you make with people you never would have met otherwise. It was magic. And I definitely agree that it was intimidating to go alone.
Mhm.
It felt like being sent off to camp when you're like 12 years old or something, and you're not quite sure if you're ready to stay away overnight. And then at the end of it, you've just had the best time and you've made the best friends, and you're a different person, I think, in a small way. I also couldn't recommend it enough. I've even just listening to everybody talk about their experiences makes me want to go find new ones to apply for, right? Like it's just such fond memories.
Oh, that's great. Fabulous. So as artists, did you all feel really welcomed by the community? Did you feel that you were part of the community that you were living in?
Yes, yeah. When we
Over there, okay, Cherie.
when we had our open studio day on the island, the residents of the island came out to our open studios and asked us questions and took in the art. And there are people on the island who have little bake shops out of their homes, or they do catering meals. And so we had those people involved. There were also a couple of women who were interested. They were grandmothers and their grandkids weren't close by. And so they came by in search of children to kind of, we had babysitting time slots where they would give us half an hour in the studio without our little ones underfoot.
Oh, wow.
And so definitely the people on the island were an integral part of the artist residency and making it the magic that it was. And I would second the sentiment that it's like going to camp, but only you're a big kid now. It is completely like a week at overnight camp, and
Yeah.
all of that magic that comes with it. So
That's great. That's wonderful. I was thinking of something else, but I'll go back. I'll go to anybody else want to comment on that about the community? How did you feel within the community? Did you always feel welcome?
Well, I think Chateau Orcavo is in this tiny, tiny, gorgeous little cobblestone street town. I think there's 80 people in it. So community-wise, I think Orcavo was the prominent place that's keeping this town going. And they're trying to take some of the old residencies in the town and create more places for artists to come and have.
So they're very happy you were there.
Oh, because I think this Orcavo's brought the town to life.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think Orcavo was like the chateau was the strength in this. Like if you saw where it's located in this valley, rolling hills and cows and chickens and roosters, and there was a historical church that they took us through that was spectacular, right in the middle of town, and the bells would ring every day, and the sun, like it was, because it's Europe, it's got that that magic that that I specifically enjoyed, the culture of France and croissants in the morning, like it was a magical, phenomenal experience in this little teeny town with really nothing there but little tiny houses.
That's great. It does sound magical. What about you, Jessica? 3 different experiences. Did you always feel welcome by the communities?
I would agree that Toronto Island feels almost like it is an artist commune, sort of like the whole I think it's a special, separate little world from Toronto itself, and I feel like it's very, the residency there is very integrated, I think, into the community and welcomed for sure. Pico, it sort of felt like we were in our own world a lot of the time. We sort of had our place where we were staying. Also, I should say, whenever we were there, I don't know if it's changed now, but the amount of tourism was shockingly low. It was like this beautiful place with almost zero tourists. So it
Is
was,
this because of COVID, maybe?
no,
No,
it was
no.
2017.
Oh,
It was 2017. It was the summer. It was July of 2017. Like it should have been, in my opinion. And I was grateful. I'm always grateful to be somewhere when it's not the high tourist season. But it was this weird, like pristine, beautiful, hard to find your way around. Like directions weren't easy. But other than that, I couldn't figure out why there weren't more people there. But anyway, the locals just seemed to sort of, they did their own thing. We did our own thing. There wasn't a whole lot of, other than the open studio at the end that some people came through, there wasn't a whole lot of interaction. And I think in Paris, you'd be kidding yourself if you thought anybody cared about an extra in Paris. They just
yeah.
over artists there. So I don't,
What
yeah,
about Portugal? In Portugal?
that was the island one. That was
Oh,
where
yeah.
there was no tourists. Yeah, it was, I mean, I didn't feel unwelcomed. And the Azores is also, it was funny that you hear a lot of English speakers, and a lot of the people who live there now did live in Toronto. And our Portuguese population in Toronto is apparently mostly from the islands, not from mainland, for a couple of reasons. The whaling industry collapsed, you know, like things happened on the islands and people needed to move. And for some reason they moved to Toronto. So there was, you'd be walking around and people were wearing Blue Jays caps and stuff. It was a bit surreal, but yeah, as far as, I didn't get the impression that they really cared one way or the other that we were there. They didn't seem super interested, and they didn't seem super offended or put out or anything.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Was there anything, I know you all highly recommend that we do this, but was there anything negative about it? No. Nothing negative at all. That's wonderful.
Going home. was
Going
the-
home, crying at the end.
Yeah.
If you do go to Orcavo, I highly recommend you add time on at the end, because when you leave, for me anyways, I couldn't have gotten on that plane right away. I just wanted to stay. I just wanted to stay in France. So if you have the opportunity to go and you have the time, I would add on something at the end.
That's a good
Just
suggestion.
so you're not rushing to get to the airport, to get on the plane. I think most people spent 5 days somewhere afterwards, just kind of taking it all in, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Rushing.
Does anyone else have any recommendations like that, where from your personal experience, if someone else was applying to go to this place, you would recommend they do this?
I would say the same, only also I would I don't deal well with jet lag, so I would buffer a few days ahead of being there so that I could be a good version of myself when I meet all these new people.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah.
I found that, so the first residency was 5 days, the second was 7 days. And now they're open ending the residency on Toronto Island, because really I found that I was just getting into a groove in the studio 5 days in. And so I requested, like, can we do this again? And can we make it longer? And so now I know that for that particular residency, there is availability to stay longer, but all of the Artscape residencies that are on the island, I would say go for 2 weeks, because you really, you know, the first couple of days at least, you're finding your way around the kitchen and getting unpacked and getting sorted in and kind of going for walks and taking in the outside and bringing it into the studio. So my recommendation would be definitely 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah.
And what do you mean by it's open-ended? I mean, how can they have people, excuse me, you know, you just stay as long as you like?
Well, there are some families who need to be back because they're, for that particular residency, where they need to be back because they've got a child who's, you know, they've taken out of school. So, but I might be able to stay for 3 weeks because my child is preschool age. And so they've extended it so you can apply to stay for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, but initially it was only offered as a 5-day residency.
Oh, I see. So you would establish beforehand how long you were going to stay. So it wasn't really open-ended. It was, I'm going to stay for 3 weeks. If you choose
Yeah.
to do that. Yeah.
But while you're there, if also you change your mind and you would like to extend your stay, if they have openings, they are generally the Artscape organizers are generally pretty flexible and accommodating.
Wow.
It may be that they're booked up and so they can't accommodate your request last minute, but if they do have openings, they are more than happy to have people stay a little bit longer.
It's very thin, huh?
I'm sorry, what's happening?
I think somebody put their did unmuted themselves by mistake.
Oh, unmuted themselves. Okay.
Yeah. So
Well, I
there
was
is a-
just going to, sorry, go ahead, Gail.
there is one question that is not a specific question, but more general question.
Mhm.
Do any of our guests think that ageism is a factor?
Ooh, interesting question.
Very good question, because if I can answer it, I thought it was wonderfully diverse with age. So there was a writer, a phenomenal Julie. I think she was 28 writing a Broadway play, and we became like fast friends. Like age didn't seem to matter. I'm 60 and there were 2 artists older than me and down to like 25, 30. So I don't know for you guys, but for me, it didn't matter. And there were men and women and all different ages, characters of people. Like it, for me in art, my residency, it did not matter. It was just the 5 of us that hiked every day were a variety of ages and became fast friends. So for me, it didn't matter. I thought it was wonderful actually to have a young girl from Los Angeles who's an incredible graphic designer who designs clothes, and we're in touch and ordering clothes. Like it's fascinating when you jump into something like this and you meet all these people. It doesn't matter about age. It's just you open your heart to the experience and to people. And it's just, I would say in my experience, not at all. But there was a variety of ages, which I thought was really
Interesting. Jessica and Cherie, what did you feel about ageism? Any?
The one when I was in Paris, the youngest guy who attended it was 18, I think, which surprised me because at 18 I would not have been brave enough to do that. And the oldest woman was 78, and she was amazing. And she was, because I mean, at that age, you've got confidence, you've got decades of living in your artist career, and she was one of my favorite people to talk to about everything about life and stuff. And then on the other scale of it, the 18-year-old was fun to talk to because you forget what you were like when you were 18. It's nice to sort of to have those interactions as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed that too, the vast range.
And did you feel there was a vast range at your other 2 experiences as well?
Not as much as that. That was the most dramatic one. At the other ones, I was never the youngest or the oldest, and I would say there were, well, and even the organizer, yeah, there was always somebody who's at least, I would guess off the top of my head 15 years older than me, and probably somebody who was close to 15 years younger than me. So
wow,
that's a pretty good range no matter what.
For sure it is. Yeah. Cherie, what did you think about ageism?
I think it's a non-issue. I mean, with an artist residency that is centering around parenthood, obviously most of the people who were there were in their childbearing years. I was the oldest I was 46 because I was 45 when I had my son. So I was definitely at the older end of the spectrum. But you know, there were people, artists of all ages who were in residency, who were joining us for meals. And then we had these little people there. And actually the older residents loved having all of these little screaming maniacs running through the hallways and just like bringing life into the old schoolhouse. And I mean, they weren't always screaming maniacs, but sometimes they were screaming maniacs. So definitely I would say no. And there were same-sex partners, and it felt very inclusive to me. It didn't matter what the color of your skin was, what age you were, what your sexuality was. Just come and love one another and have a good time and learn and grow together and take that back out into the world with you.
Oh, that's great. Now I'm just looking a little at the clock here, and it's 8:20. And Barb, I think it's 8:30 we're supposed to go to, right? Is Barb still there? I don't see her. So I was thinking that maybe we could open up a bit, Gail, to questions. Is Barb still there?
Yes.
Oh, you are. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, so I was wondering if we could, since we have 10 minutes left, we're supposed to go to 8:30, right?
Anytime now.
Okay, well, I was just thinking maybe we could open it up and see, do you want to unmute people, or how do you usually do that?
Usually people unmute themselves.
Unmute themselves to ask a question. Okay, so could we do that then? Are there any other questions? Is there anyone who would
No,
like?
I think we've covered everything pretty well in the chat. So
Oh, okay.
let's just go for it.
No one else has any other questions they want to come on and ask?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, all right, all right. Gail, do you have any other questions? Because we've kind of covered the ones that we had on here. Let me just.
I have a question.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Great. Okay, so my concern about doing residency is about changing the work or catering the work to the place or wherever I end up. And I'm wondering, out of these three artists, if they consider that before that or before they went, or so that's one question. The second question is, we make a living from selling of our artwork, and so I'm very wary of how it taints my process so that I don't go completely left field. So I'm wondering if you had a concern, if it would affect your process in making work that sells to the public. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Good,
Okay.
those are good questions. Anyone who would like to respond to those
I
questions?
will jump in on the number 2 question because I think, like Marjolaine, I'm very aware of, you've got to market things, you've got to have a predictable, saleable product, as much as it is art. And I can tell you flat out, the one I did in Pico Island, which was the Portugal one where I went to do image transfers of jellyfish, I never sold any of those pieces. I didn't even come close to selling any of them. People said, oh, that's nice. And it didn't fit in with my other stuff. That's the stuff that people expect from me. I did include them in a contact show through the Artist Network Gallery, and that felt cool. They got to be seen by people. I got to take pictures of them. For me, it was the process. It was getting out of the stuff that I normally made, doing it in a completely different way, completely different subject matter. And then that work, in a super indirect way, that work because of a book recommendation from somebody at that residency about water and the psychological brain effects of being around water, that led to my whole Serenity Experience installation stuff, which led to a grant project that sort of took me through that COVID winter. And so there are things out there, there are strings being pulled that you can't even imagine, Marjolaine.
Right. So it's this creative
Let
process.
somebody pull them.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
And you'll still come back, right? Like you'll still have
Yeah.
your stuff that people expect, and you'll make it and you'll sell it. But I think for me, just the kind of, I tend to be very type A. And so pushing myself out of the make, sell, market, whatever kind of cycle into something that was just like, let's just play. I think that was really freeing and important personally.
And
Maybe
did you propose that when you did your application? Did you present that as part of the?
Yeah,
as an
the
option?
jellyfish image transfers was my purpose and intention. And at the time, I had written a grant proposal. This was back with Canada's big birthday. I think it was the 150th. There was a ton of grant money for really ambitious projects that were well out of the scope of what you normally did. And I didn't get any of that. But I did spend a ton of time writing a grant proposal for this thing that involved like aerial silks and music and all that, like something that was not at all anything like what I normally do. And it all revolved around the jellyfish thing. And in the end, my jellyfish thing was 5 image transfers about that big. And so
Wow.
it
That's
went,
wild, actually.
you know, it was, and then I also, when I came back, I decided I hadn't spent enough time with it yet. So I ended up going out to, I forgot about this part, I went out to Nova Scotia and spent 10 days with my mom and sort of did like a self-imposed artist residency where we went and walked the shores during the day and then came home and did image transfers at night together. And it was really, so that alone was also kind of a really special experience.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that. I hadn't spent time with just me and my mom since I was probably 3 years old, because then siblings and stuff. So it was nice.
Very nice. What about Vicki and Cherie?
The question, are you, what's the girl's name?
Marjolin.
Hi, Vicki, it's Marjolin.
Hi. Are you concerned about, I'm just trying to get your question right. Are you concerned about going there and not creating work that you can bring home and sell, or?
No, I've always had a hesitancy about being in creative environments that taint my process, so that I go, that can undermine my process to make a living from it. And I'm not saying that everything I make is order to sell, but when you start messing around with the creative process, you can kind of lose tact to
Like you're
that.
getting away from what you're
Yeah.
doing.
So
I think
part of it is that, but the other part of it is like, whenever I look at these residencies, I start to think, okay, what am I going to make there? I'm not a landscape artist, right? I do
Right.
figures, interiors, that kind of thing, more domestic kind of spaces or street scenes, but I don't, it's more domestic figurative stuff. So when I look at the residencies, I go, okay, so I'm not going to sit in the landscape of France. It's not, that's.
But if you're interested in going to Orcova, we should get together, because some of the artists, they spent every day painting inside the chateau. A spectacular
Right.
romantic room. One guy, Tom, he went up the hill, did plein air, he did the cemetery and the little streets in Orcovo. Everybody, the abstract artists, they did some of them did portraits of each other. Like, I think it's so open-ended.
And did you, when you wrote the application though, did you outline the work that you're going to do?
No, it's all
Okay.
about you, why you want to go. They look at your art. I think they're very particular at looking at the different art. And I can't get away from my style. Like it's in my blood. It's what I do. I just changed the landscape there for me. But when I think of what all the other artists did, it's fascinating. Like I think my only advice for you is to just jump in and do it, because life is short and it's an opportunity that only comes by you not that often. And, whatever you end up doing there, it could be a continuation of what you're doing now. You just continue with it, or you go there and I think Kate, part of artist, she's going in next May, and she says, I'm going to do something completely different, but she's chosen that. She's chosen that to do something different when she's there. I chose to just do what I love to do.
Okay.
It's different. So I think at Orcovo it's different, where you go and do what you want to do, and the application isn't about what you're planning on doing when
Right.
you get there.
Okay,
So.
got it.
What about Cherie? I don't think Cherie commented on this question. Where is she still there? Where I'm not seeing.
I'm here. Hi, Marjolin.
There you are.
Hi, Cherie. Bye.
As you know, I'm a bit of an experimenter and I kind of like to push the envelope. So, and I'm not afraid that my collectors aren't going to love what I create. So I just put it out there, and then the people who are drawn to it are drawn to it, and those who are not drawn to it are not drawn to it. And I think there's something to be said, though, about going and immersing yourself without any expectations and just being in the space and allowing what wants to emerge. And whether that's work that you're already involved in creating similar to your current process, or your soul may say, you know, I want to take you in this direction today, Marjolaine, let's go play. And you go in that direction. And it doesn't mean that it's work that you have to show or share with anybody else, but there might be something from that process of stepping outside of your usual prescribed creativity that you add to your current process that shifts the nuance of your work, that invites another collector into your fold. So
Right.
I don't worry about it. And I don't go with an agenda. I go with a lot of supplies. I'm a maximalist. So I think I sent a picture to Kate, and I've got like Rubbermaid bins of my paints and my paintbrushes, because I like to have as much stuff at my disposal as I can when I'm creating. So that's just my approach. I've also gone on other trips and where I've, you know, packed things in my suitcase, so I had to minimize. But when I do a residency, I like to have more supplies. But I would say, yeah, just go and play and see what wants to emerge, because maybe it's going to enhance what you're doing now and it's going to grow your collector base. So, you know,
Right.
thinking that it's going to detract from your collector base isn't, I don't know that mindset is, you know, helpful in your growth as an artist.
Well,
Mm.
yeah. It's
Okay.
no, I think it's a risk for sure, but I agree. I think it's more of being freeing, and yeah, it's good.
And you can always come back to your old process, like just because you
I
go
think it's all, yeah, it's just, I'm a very like, a plan. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to be. This is the kind of the whole schedule, and releasing that and going to someplace just to create for the purpose of creating is terrifying to me.
Oh, I think it is scary, Marjolaine. I think it is really scary.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
know.
exactly why you should do it.
I think that's the whole thing. I think that,
Yeah.
and exactly, yeah, that's exactly why we should do it.
So,
Um,
do it. Yeah.
Wow, this has been amazing. Do we have any other questions?
The only other question that was on here that would probably be a quick question. The participating artists, were they at different levels of their careers, like emerging, mid, or later? So Vicki, where would you say, when you went to your residency, where would you say you were in your career?
Where I was in my career?
Yeah, would you say emerging, mid, or later?
Later. I mean, I've done art my whole life. So for me, I didn't go thinking about what level I was in my art. I think you got to go and just jump in, and it's not just about the art. It's about the experience of being in a different place, away from your comfort zone, meeting people you've never met before. You go into the studio with white walls, and I think I was ready for it. Like, I was ready. I was excited. I couldn't believe I was accepted. I was so thrilled to go. And I think you kind of have to go with that open heart, like what level you're at. Like, I think you got to just throw that out the window. I think you just got to, because, you know, we're all artists, and all these artists were so supportive of each other and so kind. And I didn't think of
I see.
anybody
Okay.
there at a lower level than me or a higher level than me.
Okay.
That would be my opinion of work.
Okay, actually, the person who asked the question was saying of the people that were in the residencies, do you think that they were looking for people with lots of experience? That's what this question looks like to me now.
So in the application, would they want all, like, yeah, yes, they have all the years. I don't know. I think they, I don't know. I never asked them that. And were they looking for, I don't know. I think the application is very important, what you say and what you do and how you present yourself in any application, a body of work that's cohesive, great photographs, like it's all that basic application process when you're applying to anything. Be proud of yourself and believe in yourself and just jump in. Whatever, there was varying types of art. I was the only landscape artist, so it wasn't all about landscape there for sure. Very abstract, very graphic, all sorts of different types of artists. So I don't like, it's an interesting question. I never thought that anyone there was, all of them had been doing art a while though, because in our conversations, you know, you hear about their history and where they've been and what they've done and stuff, but just go, just apply and go.
Yeah.
Just
Just
jump
go, girl.
in. It's so incredible.
I
You know,
agree with you. Just
stop worrying
just
about
go.
the little things.
Just go.
Yeah.
Stop it. I mean, stop judging yourself and belittling yourself. And I think as artists, we just need to lift each other up and support each other. And this atmosphere did that. There was nobody judging, or everyone just loved what each other did and brought to the table. So unique, and your life experiences, and you know, what clothes you were wearing, what shoes you wore for dinner, and you know, what you dressed up, and you put on this video and you swung from the chandelier. Like, it was so incredible. I can't even express what kind of experience I had.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, you definitely have all really inspired us to jump in and face things that may seem a little scary, but to just go for it. And I think we're just about out of time, aren't we?
It looks like perfect
Yeah.
time.
So I really want to thank you so much, Vicki, Cherie, and Jessica. This has been really, really interesting. And I think a lot of people were inspired. I guess that's the bottom line. So thank you for sharing so generously your experiences, because it was very kind of you.
Thank you for asking.
Okay, I think Barb, where's Barb? Are we? I think we're going to sign off, because I think,
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
It's been wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.